Okay, get in here. We've got important business to discuss. December 21st, 2017. Are we witnessing the death knell for the deep state? The deep state that murdered JFK, Martin Luther King Jr., that possibly did 9/11, the Las Vegas massacre, numerous false flags. Are we witnessing the death knell for the Rothschilds, the international satanic cult, child sex traffickers, satanic ritualistic murderers of children, and just your run-of-the-mill corrupt politician? Let's find out. This executive order went into effect today. And while everybody else was looking over there at the tax cut celebrations, over here is where the good stuff was really happening. Okay, property, start at the top. Executive order blocking the property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. Issued on December 21st, 2017. By the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, including the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the National Emergencies Act, the Global Magnitsky's Human Rights Accountability Act, Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, and Section 301 of Title III of the United States Code. So those are the statutes that he is referencing for this direct order that give him the power to do as follows. I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, find the prevalence and severity of human rights abuse and corruption that have their source in whole or insubstantial part outside of the United States, such as those committed or directed by persons listed in the annex to this order, have reached such scope and gravity that they threaten the stability of international political and economic systems. Human rights abuse and corruption undermine the values that form an essential foundation of stable, secure, and functioning societies, have devastating impacts on individuals, weaken democratic institutions, degrade the rule of law, perpetuate violent conflicts, facilitate the activities of dangerous persons, and undermine economic markets. The United States seeks to impose tangible and significant consequences on those who commit serious human rights abuse or engage in corruption, as well as to protect the financial system of the United States from abuse by these same persons. I therefore determine that serious human rights abuse and corruption around the world constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States, and I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with that threat. I hereby determine and order. Section 1A. All property and interests in property that are in the United States that hereafter come within the United States, or that are or hereafter come within the possession or control of any United States person of the following persons, are blocked and may not be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, or otherwise dealt in. Number one, the persons listed in the annex to this order. So those persons who are specifically listed, and I'll get to that. 2, any foreign person determined by the Secretary of the Treasury in consultation with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General to be responsible for or complicit in or to have directly or indirectly engaged in serious human rights abuse Rothschilds, pedo traffickers, human traffickers. B, to be a current or former government official or person acting for or on behalf of such an official who is responsible or complicit in or has directly or indirectly engaged in corruption, including the misappropriation of state assets, the expropriation of private assets for personal gain, corruption related to government contracts, or the extraction of natural resources or bribery. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Uranium One, selling our state secrets, Bill Clinton. Okay. Let me skip back to the beginning of B so I can remember where I was. To be a current or former government official or person acting on behalf of such official who is responsible for or complicit in or is directly or indirectly engaged in. B2, the transfer or the facilitation of the transfer of the proceeds of corruption. So the entire spider web of people that were in bed with those people. To be or have been a leader or official of, this is C, an entity, including any government entity that has engaged in or whose members have engaged in any of the activities described in the above sections relating to the leader or official's tenure. So all these government officials. Or an entity whose property and interest in government are blocked pursuant to this order as a result of activities related to the leader or official's tenure, or to have attempted to engage in any of the activities described in subsections 2A, 2B1, or 2B2. And 3, any person determined by the Secretary of Treasury in consultation with the Secretary of State and Attorney General who A, to have material assisted, sponsored, or provided financial, material, or technological support for or goods or services to or support of any activity described above this section that is conducted by a foreign person. Any person whose property and interest in property are blocked pursuant to this order. Any entity, including any governmental entity that has engaged in or whose members have engaged in any of the activities described above, where the activity is conducted by a foreign person. B, to be owned, controlled by, or to have acted or purported to act for or on behalf directly or indirectly any person whose property and interest in property are blocked pursuant to this order. So yeah, once you take Soros's property is blocked, if you continue to act on behalf of that blocked person. And C, to have attempted to engage in any of the activities described in subsection 3, A or B. And little b, the prohibitions in section A of this section apply except to the extent provided by statutes or in regulations, orders, directives, or licenses that may be issued pursuant to this order, and notwithstanding any contract entered into or any license or permit granted before the effective date of this order. Section 2. The unrestricted immigrant and non-immigrant entry into the United States of aliens determined to meet one or more of the criteria in Section 1 of this order would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, and the entry of such persons into the United States as immigrants or non-immigrants is hereby suspended. Such persons shall be treated as persons covered by Section 1 of the Proclamation 8693 of July 24, 2011, suspension of entry of aliens subject to United Nations Security Council travel bans, and International Economic Powers Act sanctions. Section 3. I hereby determine that the making of donations of the types of articles specified in Section 203(b)(2) of IEEPA by, to, or for the benefit of any person whose property and interest in property are blocked pursuant to this order would seriously impair my ability to deal with the national emergency declared in this order, and I hereby prohibit such donations as provided by Section 1 of this order. Section 4. The prohibitions in Section 1 include the making of any contribution or provision of funds, goods, or services by, to, or for the benefit of any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order. It looks like it says once I take their stuff, you can't give them any more stuff. B. The receipt of any contribution or provision of funds, goods, or services from any such person. Section 5. Any transaction that evades or avoids, has the purpose of evading or avoiding, causes a violation of, or attempts to violate any of the prohibitions set forth in this order, is prohibited. Any conspiracy formed to violate any of the prohibitions set forth in this order is prohibited. Section 6. For the purpose of this order, the term person means entity or individual. The term entity means partnership, association, trust, joint venture, corporation, group, subgroup, or other organization. C. The term United States person means any United States citizen, permanent resident, alien, entity organized under the laws of the United States, or any jurisdiction within the United States, including foreign branches, or any person in the United States. Section 7. For those persons whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order, who might have a constitutional presence in the United States, I find that because of the ability to transfer funds or other assets instantaneously, prior notice to such persons of measures to be taken pursuant to this order would render those measures ineffectual, and therefore determine that for these measures to be effective in addressing the national emergency declared in this order, there need be no prior notice of a listing or determination made pursuant to this order. So ex parte freezing of those assets. We're not going to tip you off unless you quickly transfer those assets out of our reach. We're just going to seize them, and then you can have your day in court. Section 8. Some of these people might not even want their day in court, but anyway. Section 8. The Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Secretary of State, is hereby authorized to take such actions, including adopting rules and regulations, and to employ all powers granted to me by IEEPA and the Act as may be necessary to implement this order, and Section 1263A of the Act with respect to the determinations provided for therein. The Secretary of the Treasury may, consistent with applicable law, redelegate any of those functions to other officers and agencies of the United States. All agencies shall take all appropriate measures within their authority to implement this order. Section 9. Secretary of State is hereby authorized to take such actions, including adopting rules and regulations, and to employ all powers granted to me by IEEPA, the INA, and the Act as may be necessary to carry out Section 2 of this order, and in consultation with the Secretary of Treasury, blah, blah, blah. This is all not the substantive portion of this order. It's how to bring this order to life And blah, blah, blah. Okay, Section 10 might be interesting. The Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, is hereby authorized to determine that circumstances no longer warrant the blocking of the property and interest in property of a person listed in the annex to this order. So not the rest of the people, but the annex to this order, and to take necessary action to give effect to that determination. So if we no longer need to keep your stuff and you're on the annex list, we can give it back. 11. The Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Secretary of State, is hereby authorized to submit recurring and final reports to Congress on the national emergency declared in this order. This order is effective 12:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, December 21st, 2017. Happy winter solstice. And Section 13. This order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its offices, employees, or agents of any other person. In other words, they do not give you the right to have an action against the government based on this. The sovereign must give you those rights, and they did not. They hereby decline to. Okay, now let's go look at the annex, if I can remember which tab. Okay, here it is. So the annex, the persons on this list were by definition subject to this list. But what I'm thinking is these are sort of examples to get your mind going of, because, as far as we know, there's no storm. There's no calm before a storm. There's no storm. We're just blah, blah, blah. We're just going along as usual, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Nothing to see here. So here are the types of persons that may eventually end up on this list. So this is from the Treasury, Secretary of Treasury. New executive order implements the Global Maginski's Human Rights Accountability Act, provides for Treasury sanctions against malign actors worldwide. It says malign, okay. Washington. Today, the Trump administration launched a new sanctions regime targeting human rights abusers and corrupt actors around the world, building on the Global Maginski Human Rights Accountability Act passed by Congress last year. President Donald J. Trump signed an executive order today declaring a national emergency with respect to serious human rights abuse and corruption around the world, and providing for the imposition of sanctions on actors engaged in these malign activities. In an annex to the order, the president imposed sanctions on 13 serious human rights abusers and corrupt actors. In addition, the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, acting on behalf of the Secretary of the Treasury in consultation with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, imposed sanctions on an additional 39 affiliated individuals and entities under the newly issued order. Today, the United States is taking a strong stand against human rights abuse and corruption globally by shutting these bad actors out of the United States financial system. Treasury is freezing their assets and publicly denouncing the egregious acts they've committed, sending a message that there is a steep price to pay for their misdeeds, said Secretary of Treasury Steve Mnuchin. At the direction of President Trump, Treasury and our interagency partners will continue to take decisive and impactful actions to hold accountable those who abuse human rights, perpetuate corruption, and undermine American ideals. As a result of today's actions, all of the assets within the United States jurisdiction of the individuals and entities included in the annex to the order or designated by OFAC are blocked, and U.S. persons are generally prohibited from engaging in transactions with them. Okay. So quickly, let's look at some of the people who are in the annex. Yahya Jammeh. I'm not familiar with this person. The former president of the Gambia, who came to power in 1994, stepped down in 2017, had a long history of engaging in serious human rights abuses and corruption, created terror and assassination squad called the Junglers that directly answered to him. Who do we know that has a terror and assassination squad in the United States? Jammeh used the Junglers to threaten, terrorize, interrogate, and kill individuals whom Jammeh assessed to be threats. Who do we know that does that? Hillary Clinton? Excuse me. During Jammeh's tenure, he ordered the Junglers to kill a local religious leader, journalists, members of the political opposition, Hillary Clinton, and former members of the government, among others. Jammeh used the Gambia's National Intelligence Agency, familiar, as a repressive tool of the regime. Okay, so somebody else that's like that person might end up on this list. Okay, Roberto Jose Rivas Reyes, president of Nicaragua's Supreme Electoral Council, drawing a reported government salary of $60,000 per year. Okay, so he's got this government salary and it's $60,000 per year, and suddenly he's had the ability to amass sizable personal wealth, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, including multiple properties, private jets, luxury vehicles, and a yacht. Okay. He's also perpetrated electoral fraud, undermining Nicaragua's electoral institutions. So we're going to drive them in and make people look how terrible these people are. They're terrible. Dan Gertler is an international businessman and billionaire who has amassed his fortune through hundreds of millions of dollars worth of opaque and corrupt mining and oil deals in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He's used his close friendship with the president to act as a middleman for mining asset sales, requiring some multinational companies to go through him to do business with the Congolese state. Okay, as a result, I mean, this one could be almost any of them. Sounds a lot like Hillary. As a result, between 2010 and 2012 alone, DRC reportedly lost over $1.36 billion in revenues from the underpricing of mining assets. Okay, we see where these are going. We've got a lot of like characters right here in our own filthy swamp. Slobodan Tesic. Slobodan Tesic is among the biggest dealers of arms and munitions in the Balkans. He spent nearly a decade on the United Nations travel ban list for violating UN sanctions against arms exports to Liberia. In order to secure arms contracts with various countries, Tesic would directly or indirectly provide bribes and financial assistance to officials. We got plenty of those guys that are going to end up on this list once we reveal these indictments. Meng Meng So. What did he do? What did Meng Meng do? What's Meng Meng running around here doing? In his former role as the chief of the Burmese Army's Western Command, Meng Meng So oversaw the military operation in Burma's Rakhine state responsible for widespread human rights abuses. I think I read this one. Yeah, we need this one. Blah, blah, blah. The United States government examined credible evidence of his activities, including extrajudicial killings, sexual violence, and arbitrary arrest, as well as the widespread burning of villages. In August 27th, witnesses reportedly described mass killings, got those, Las Vegas, and arson attacks. Okay. Looking for the one about the... Okay. Benjamin Bolmel, president of ABMC Thai's South Sudan Construction Company, He served as the Sudanese president's principal financial advisor. Okay. Bol Mel oversees ABMC, which has been awarded contracts worth tens of millions of dollars by the government of South Sudan and allegedly received preferential treatment from high-level officials. And the government of South Sudan did not hold a competitive process for selecting them. Okay. That's serious. All right, now this is the one that's going to get some of these Satanists in trouble. Shah, Mukhtar Hamid Shah is a Pakistani surgeon specializing in kidney transplants, who Pakistani police believe to be involved in kidnapping, wrongful confinement, and the removal of and trafficking in human organs, Podestas. As an owner of the kidney center in Rawalpindi, Pakistan, Shah was involved in the kidnapping and detention of and removing of kidneys from Pakistani laborers. So, coming to get you. Coming to get you. And Gulnara Karimova, daughter of former Uzbekistan leader Islam Karimov, headed a powerful organized crime syndicate that leveraged state actors to expropriate businesses, monopolize markets, solicit bribes, administer extortion rackets. So, blah, blah, blah. Hillary and Bill Clinton, etc. Let me see if we got any other. I think we covered everything, and these are just this is just overkill to get into all the rest of them. But you get the gist of it. Get the gist of it. This is huge. Huge stuff. Huge.